I've never liked scarecrows. Something about them always made my skin crawl, even as a kid. Maybe it was the way they stood so still in the fields, their button eyes staring blankly across the rows of corn, like silent sentinels waiting for something. When I was younger, I told myself it was just the straw sticking out of their sleeves or the wind tugging at their hats. But deep down, I always felt that if I stared too long, one of them might turn its head. Years later, I found myself staying at my uncle's farm for a few weeks one summer. It was supposed to be a kind of escape city life had worn me down, and he offered me the quiet of the countryside. I thought I'd find peace out there, surrounded by open skies and endless fields. For the first few days I did. I'd wake up early, help feed the animals, and then wander along the corn rows in the evenings, listening to the cicadas sing. The farm was old, a little rundown, but it had its charm. That's when I noticed the scarecrow. It was standing in the far corner of the field, near the tree line, propped up on a wooden post. At first glance, it looked like any other scarecrow, a faded plaid shirt, patched up overalls, and a wide-brimmed hat that had seen better days. Its head was a burlap sack with 2 stitched-on buttons for eyes and a crude slash for a mouth. Nothing unusual. But what bothered me was how it seemed closer each evening I walked by. The first time, it was maybe 30 yards away from the fence. The next night, 25. The third night, maybe 20. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. Maybe the farmhands had moved it to cover a different part of the cornfield. Or maybe I'd misremembered where it had been. I didn't want to sound paranoid, especially not to my uncle, so I kept it to myself. But every time I looked out the window from the guest room upstairs, I could swear the scarecrow had shifted just slightly, but enough to make me doubt my own memory. One night I stayed out by the barn later than usual. The sun had dipped low, casting long orange shadows across the fields. The cicadas had quieted, and the air felt thick, almost too heavy to breathe. I stood by the fence and looked toward the scarecrow. That's when I realized something that made my stomach turn. The scarecrow wasn't on a post anymore. It was standing. Not perfectly upright, more like slumped, as if leaning forward, its arms dangling loosely at its sides. I froze, staring, my heart thudding in my chest. The hat tilted slightly as the evening wind picked up, and for one insane moment, I thought I saw the head turn just an inch in my direction. I ran inside and slammed the door, trying to laugh it off. Maybe the post had rotted. Maybe it fell. Maybe I was overtired. I didn't tell my uncle. I couldn't. How do you explain something like that without sounding insane? That night, I had trouble sleeping. The farmhouse creaked with every gust of wind, and the old windows rattled in their frames. Around midnight, I heard something else, the faint crunch of footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, moving across the gravel. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps stopped beneath my window. I didn't dare look. My chest felt tight, like if I moved even an inch, whatever was down there would know I was awake. Minutes passed, or maybe it was hours, I couldn't tell. At some point, I finally drifted into a restless sleep. The next morning, I forced myself to check the field. From my window, the scarecrow was back on its post, standing stiff and still like nothing had happened. Its arms were outstretched again, its head tilted toward the corn. I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed it all, almost. But then I saw the footprints. In the dirt beneath my window, clear as day, were prints too large to be mine, pressed deep into the soil. They led from the cornfield straight to the farmhouse, then back again. I swallowed hard and told myself it could have been my uncle. Maybe he'd been checking the fences at night, but deep down I knew he never came that close to my room. Over the next week, things only got worse. I kept waking up to noises outside, the scrape of something against the siding, the hollow knock of wood on wood, and once, the unmistakable sound of something tapping on the window glass. I never had the courage to look. One evening, just before dusk, I forced myself to walk to the edge of the field. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe to see ropes holding the scarecrow in place, or signs of the farmhands moving it around. But when I got close, I realized something terrifying. The scarecrow wasn't tied down at all. No rope, no nails, no wires holding it to the post. It was just standing there, balanced on its own, as if it could step off at any moment. The smell hit me then, a faint, sour odor, like rot mixed with damp straw. The closer I got, the stronger it became. My stomach churned. I forced myself to look at its face. The burlap sack wasn't just stitched crudely. It was stained, dark in places where something had soaked through. The buttons for eyes weren't buttons at all. They were glassy, rounded, and disturbingly lifelike. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. And that's when I heard it so soft I thought I imagined it at first. A whisper. It came from the scarecrow. I couldn't make out the words, just the rasp of breath through burlap, low and broken, like someone trying to speak after being buried alive. My knees buckled, and I turned and ran, not stopping until I was back inside with every door locked. That night was the worst. I woke to the sound of wood splitting downstairs like the front door was being forced open. My uncle was out of town, so I was alone. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a rusted fireplace poker, and crept down the stairs, every step groaning beneath my weight. The living room was dark, only faint moonlight spilling through the curtains. I held my breath, listening. Then I saw it. Through the window, half hidden in shadow, the scarecrow stood pressed against the glass, its head tilted, those glassy eyes staring in. Its mouth, the crude slash stitched into the burlap, had torn wider, and I swear I saw teeth glinting beneath. I dropped the poker and ran back upstairs, slamming the door to my room. I barricaded myself with the dresser, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Outside, on the porch roof just below my window, came the sound of heavy footsteps, straw dragging against shingles. I don't remember falling asleep, but somehow I woke up the next morning, the sun shining weakly through the curtains. When I dared to look outside, the scarecrow was gone, back in the field, standing on its post like nothing had happened. I left that day. I didn't say goodbye to my uncle, didn't explain. I just packed my things and drove. But even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear that whisper. And sometimes late at night, when I pass a field on the side of the highway, I see a scarecrow in the distance. And I swear, it moves. I've always hated barns at night. During the day, they're harmless enough, dust dancing in the sunlight, the smell of hay and animals, the hum of flies. But once the sun goes down, those same spaces feel hollow, cavernous, and wrong. As if all the warmth drains out of the wood and leaves nothing but shadows. The summer I turned 18, I stayed with my cousin Daniel on his family's farm. His parents were away visiting relatives, so it was just the two of us rattling around the old house, trying to keep the chores going. The place was beautiful in its way. Rolling wheat fields, cicadas at dusk, skies so wide it felt like you could fall upward into them. But at night, the farm changed. Daniel warned me the very first evening. Don't go in the barn after dark. I laughed. Why not? He just shrugged. Weird stuff happens there. Noises, shadows. Dad doesn't like talking about it. I thought he was messing with me, the way cousins do. But the seriousness in his eyes stuck with me. He wasn't joking. The first few nights passed without incident. We stayed up late, playing cards, listening to the distant hoot of owls and the rustling of wheat in the wind. Then, on the fourth night, I woke to a sound that froze me in my bed. Thump, thump, thump. It came steady, like a heartbeat, from outside. At first I thought it was a loose shutter banging in the wind, but the rhythm was too even, too deliberate. My mouth went dry when I realized the sound was coming from the barn. I lay there, listening, until curiosity burned away enough of the fear to get me moving. I slipped on my boots, grabbed a flashlight, and crept downstairs. The farmhouse floorboards groaned under my feet, and every creak felt like it echoed for miles. When I opened the front door, the night hit me cool, damp, eerily quiet. Even the crickets had gone silent. The barn loomed ahead like a hulking shadow. Its red paint had long since faded, and the roof sagged like tired shoulders. With each step closer, the thumping grew louder. Thump, pause, thump. I stopped a few feet from the door. My flashlight shook in my hand as I raised it. The beam barely cut into the darkness beyond the warped wooden doors. For a moment, I almost turned back. I could have just locked the door, gone back to bed, pretended I heard nothing. But I pushed the door open. The smell hit me instantly, damp hay, mildew, and beneath it all, something metallic, like old blood. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dust and cobwebs. Empty stalls lined the walls, tools hung rusting on nails, and the floor was littered with broken boards. The thumping stopped. Silence. I held my breath, ears straining. Then came whispers. Soft, broken, rising, and falling like a conversation I couldn't quite catch. My stomach nodded. The sound wasn't coming from in front of me, it was above. I tilted the flashlight toward the hayloft. A ladder leaned against the wall, the wood warped and splintered. My chest tightened as the whispers grew louder. They weren't words I understood, just fragments, syllables, like the echo of voices underwater. I should have left. I should have run. Instead, I started climbing. Each rung groaned under my weight. The smell of rot grew stronger the higher I went. When I reached the top, I swept the flashlight across the loft. That's when I saw it. In the corner stood a figure. At first glance, I thought it was a scarecrow or mannequin someone had left there. It wore tattered overalls and a flannel shirt, one sleeve hanging half off. Its head was covered by a burlap sack, dark stains creeping up from the bottom. The sack bulged slightly, as though something shifted beneath it. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Then the sack turned, just slightly, enough for the beam to catch the faint gleam of 2 points of light where eyes should have been. I staggered back, my foot slipping off the loft's edge. Somehow I caught myself, scrambling down the ladder so fast I nearly fell. My boots hit the dirt floor, and I bolted for the door. Behind me, the thumping started again. But this time it wasn't slow and steady. It was fast, heavy, like footsteps crashing against the floorboards, coming straight for me. I burst into the night, gasping. The barn doors slammed shut behind me with such force they rattled on their hinges. I didn't dare look back. I sprinted to the farmhouse, locked the doors, and collapsed against the wall, shaking. For hours I sat there, every nerve on fire, straining for sounds. Around 3 a.m., I heard something scrape against the siding of the house. Long, dragging, like straw or rope pulled along the wood. I clamped my hands over my ears and prayed for dawn. When sunlight finally broke, I felt like I hadn't slept in years. I stumbled into the kitchen to find Daniel already awake, sitting silently with a cup of coffee. His face was pale, drawn tight. He looked at me and said, "You went into the barn, didn't you?" I wanted to deny it, but the words caught in my throat. My silence was enough. Daniel sighed, shook his head, and muttered, "That's why we tell people not to go there after dark." He wouldn't say anything more. Not when I pressed, not when I begged. The rest of my stay, I avoided the barn completely. But it didn't matter. At night, lying awake in the farmhouse, I could still hear it, the faint thump, thump, thump drifting across the fields. And once, just before dawn, I could have sworn I heard the whispers too, calling my name. I've always thought cornfields were beautiful. There's something almost poetic about the way the stalks sway together, whispering with the wind as if sharing secrets you're not meant to hear. But if you've ever stood in one at night, really stood there, in the middle of rows so tall you can't see the sky, you'll know it's not beautiful at all. It's suffocating. The walls close in on you, the air feels heavier, and every rustle makes your heart skip a beat. I learned that the hard way, one summer night on my uncle's farm. I was about 17 at the time, staying there for a couple weeks to help with chores. My uncle's land stretched for acres, most of it swallowed up by cornfields. The house itself was a creaky old thing, built long before electricity, and the barn leaned so much to one side you'd think a strong wind could tip it over. I wasn't a city kid, but I wasn't much of a farmhand either. The quiet nights, the endless crops, the constant hum of insects, it all felt foreign to me. The trouble started with the dogs. My uncle kept two, hounds that usually slept through the night. But one evening, right after the sun slipped away and the cicadas began their buzzing chorus, the dogs started barking. Not just barking, howling, snarling, their chains rattling as they lunged toward the cornfield. I was on the porch, sipping a Coke and staring into the darkness. At first I thought maybe they'd cornered a raccoon or a stray coyote. But when I looked at the edge of the field, I swear I saw movement. It wasn't an animal, it was tall. Taller than any person should have been, its silhouette shifting between the stalks. At first, I thought maybe it was my imagination. You see something once, and your brain fills in the gaps. But then the dogs went wild again, snapping and yelping, pulling so hard on their chains I thought they'd break free. And I knew I wasn't imagining it. Something was out there. My uncle came out onto the porch, shotgun in hand. He was a hard man, not easily spooked, but I caught the flicker in his eyes when he squinted at the field. "Best get inside," he muttered. He didn't fire the gun, didn't even step off the porch, just stood there, staring at the rows of corn swaying without wind. That was the first night. The second night, the dogs started again. This time, though, I was in bed. Their barking dragged me out of half sleep, and I crept to the window overlooking the fields. I could hear the stalks shifting, the dry scrape of leaves rubbing together as something moved between them. The dogs snapped and whined, pulling against their chains like they wanted to chase it, but at the same time they seemed terrified to go in. Then I heard it low, guttural, like a voice but twisted, broken into syllables I couldn't make sense of. I wanted to believe it was just the wind. God, I really wanted to. The third night, I made the mistake of following the noise. It was stupid. I know that now. But when you're young, curiosity wins over fear. The dogs had been restless all evening, growling low in their throats even before the sun set. I waited until the house was quiet, then grabbed a flashlight and slipped outside. The night air was thick with humidity, and every insect in the county seemed to be buzzing in my ears. My sneakers crunched against the dirt path as I walked toward the corn. The dogs whimpered, pulling against their chains, as if warning me not to go. I stopped at the edge, the beam of my flashlight cutting into the rows. Nothing but stalks. Still, the noise was there, a faint rustle, a dragging sound, like something heavy was moving just beyond the reach of my light. I swallowed hard, stepped in, and instantly felt swallowed whole. The corn rose above me, closing out the sky. The beam of my flashlight shook as my hand trembled, illuminating stalk after stalk but never quite showing me what was there. I walked deeper. My heart thudded against my ribs, every sound amplified. Then the smell hit me. Rot. Damp. Sweet, cloying rot, like old meat left in the Sunday. I gagged, covering my nose with my sleeve, and that's when I heard it again, that voice. closer this time, whispering my name. I froze. The light darted left, then right, but there was nothing. Just rows of corn. The whisper came again, softer now, almost coaxing. My legs wanted to run, but my brain kept me frozen in place. Then the corn moved 10, maybe 15 feet ahead of me, parting as if something massive was sliding through it. I raised the light, and for a split second, I saw it. I don't even know how to describe it. It was tall, impossibly tall, its limbs bent at wrong angles like broken sticks. Its face, if you could call it a face, was stretched, pale, and featureless except for 2 black hollows where eyes should be. I couldn't tell if it was made of flesh or shadow, only that it didn't belong in this world. The flashlight slipped from my hand. I scrambled backward, crashing into stalks, slicing my arms on the leaves as I ran. Behind me, the whisper rose into a screech, something so loud and shrill it rattled inside my skull. I don't remember how I made it out. 1 second I was lost in a sea of corn, and the next I was tumbling onto the dirt path, gasping for breath. The dogs barked wildly, chains rattling, but they didn't run toward me. They stared into the field, hackles raised, teeth bared, and in that moment, I realized whatever had been in there, it hadn't followed me out. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that stretched face, those hollow eyes staring at me through the stalks. My uncle never asked where I'd been, though I think he knew. The next morning, the dogs were gone. Chains snapped clean, their bowls untouched. We never found them. Even now, years later, I can't drive past a cornfield without feeling my stomach knot. People say the countryside is peaceful, but they've never stood in rows of corn at night, listening to whispers that call their name. If you ever do, if you ever find yourself in that endless maze of stalks with no way out, don't follow the sound. Whatever lives in those fields isn't human, and it wants you to know its name as badly as it knows yours.